The universe is vast, its endless stretches of stars and galaxies a testament to the mystery that has captivated human imagination for centuries. In the silent dark of space, there are stories untold, secrets yet to be uncovered. This story begins with one such secret, a story of a mission that was supposed to make history but instead became one of the greatest mysteries of space exploration. In the year 2045, humanity had reached new heights. The Nighthawk, a state-of-the-art spacecraft designed for deep space exploration, was at the forefront of this new era. Its sleek design cut through the vacuum of space like a predator in the night, its advanced technologies a symbol of mankind's relentless drive to explore the unknown. The Nighthawk wasn't just a spaceship, it was a leap into the future, a symbol of hope, ambition, and discovery. Built by the world's most brilliant minds, the Nighthawk was meant to carry the crew to the very edge of the universe, to galaxies beyond our wildest imaginations. Its mission, to explore the dark corners of space where no human had ever ventured before and to gather data on distant stars, planets, and perhaps even signs of extraterrestrial life. It was to be the boldest journey ever undertaken. But as with all great adventures, the mission was filled with dangers that no one could foresee. At the heart of the mission was Commander Evelyn Hayes, a seasoned astronaut with years of experience and a passion for discovery. She had led many missions before, but this one was different. This wasn't just about reaching another planet or studying distant stars. This was about pushing the boundaries of human exploration, about answering questions that had haunted mankind for centuries. What lies beyond the known universe? Is there life on other worlds? And, most chilling of all, what's out there waiting for us? Alongside her were a team of experts, scientists, engineers, and specialists, each with their own reasons for embarking on this perilous journey. There was Dr. Samir Patel, the brilliant astrophysicist who had spent years studying the origins of the universe. There was Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, a skilled pilot and navigator with a sharp eye for danger. And there was Captain Marcus Lee, the communications officer, whose role was to maintain contact with Earth and ensure that the crew never felt truly alone in the infinite darkness of space. For months, the Nighthawk had been cruising through the outer reaches of the solar system, its advanced engines propelling it at speeds never before achieved. The crew had already passed the asteroid belt and were now on their way to a distant galaxy, a galaxy so far away it had never been fully explored by human eyes. It was a journey that would take them further than anyone had ever gone, beyond the Milky Way and into the unknown. As they sailed through the vast emptiness, the crew marveled at the beauty of the universe. They passed by shimmering nebulae and danced around spiraling galaxies, their lights casting fleeting shadows across the ship's hull. But it wasn't just the stars that fascinated them. It was the mystery of it all, the silence, the vastness, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. And yet, there was something unsettling about it. A quiet, unspoken tension that lingered in the air. It wasn't a fear of the unknown, no, the crew were explorers trained to face the dangers of space. But there was something different about this mission, something they couldn't quite put their fingers on. Commander Hayes often found herself staring out the observation window, her thoughts drifting to what lay ahead. She knew that space had a way of playing tricks on the mind. The longer you stayed in the void, the more you began to question everything. Was there life out there? Was the universe truly as empty as it seemed? Or was there something else lurking in the shadows, something beyond human comprehension? One evening, as the ship coasted through the darkness, the stillness was shattered by an unexpected signal. It was faint at first, just a ripple in the radio frequencies, something that could easily be dismissed. But it wasn't. The signal was unlike anything the Nighthawk had encountered before. It wasn't a natural phenomenon, nor was it a human transmission. It was something different, something that seemed to come from deep space, far beyond the boundaries of their mission. The signal was not just a simple message, it was structured as if it was trying to communicate. For the crew it was both exciting and terrifying. A signal from an unknown source meant that they weren't alone in the universe. It meant that someone or something was out there watching them. The excitement of discovery quickly turned into a nervous anticipation. What kind of intelligence was behind this signal? Was it a warning, a trap, or an invitation? They decided to investigate. The Nighthawk's engines hummed as they adjusted their course toward the source of the signal. The stars around them seemed to shift as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The crew sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, unsure of what awaited them in the darkness ahead. As they closed in on the source of the signal, something strange began to happen. The ship's systems, all of which had been working flawlessly for months, began to flicker. The lights dimmed slightly and the hum of the engines changed pitch. At first it was subtle, but soon it became impossible to ignore. The Nighthawk was being affected by something outside, something unknown. Lieutenant Alvarez was the first to notice it. "Commander," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "We're picking up interference. The signal's stronger, but our systems are starting to malfunction." Commander Hayes didn't hesitate. She'd seen anomalies before, but nothing like this. "Keep the course steady," she ordered. "We're not turning back now." The signal grew louder, more insistent, but it wasn't just the signal that troubled them. It was the way the ship's systems were behaving. It was as if something was deliberately trying to destabilize the Nighthawk, forcing it to lose its way. The crew could no longer ignore the growing sense of unease, and then just as they were nearing the signal's origin, the calm of space was shattered. The ship's alarms blared as every control panel in the cockpit flashed red. Something had triggered a massive surge of energy, an unnatural force that sent shockwaves through the ship. The Nighthawk trembled as if caught in the grip of some invisible hand. "What the hell is happening?" Dr. Patel gasped, clutching his seat as the ship shook violently. The lights flickered and the hum of the engines turned into an unsettling growl. Commander Hayes gritted her teeth, trying to keep calm. She was used to danger, but this was different. The ship's navigational systems were failing. The signal was no longer a simple transmission. It had become something far more dangerous, and the Nighthawk was caught in its grip. There was no turning back now. The crew had ventured too far, and they were about to discover that space, with all its beauty, could also be incredibly unforgiving. As the ship hurtled toward the unknown, no one knew what awaited them. The Nighthawk had been designed for everything except what was coming next. This introduction sets the stage for the documentary-style narrative, establishing the Nighthawk's mission and the mysterious circumstances that begin to unfold. The tension grows as the crew approaches the unknown, setting up suspense for the next parts of the story. The Nighthawk wasn't just another spacecraft. It was the pinnacle of human engineering, the result of decades of research, innovation, and dreams of reaching the farthest edges of the universe. Everything about the ship was designed with one goal in mind: to explore the unknown, to take humanity where it had never been before. And the mission it was about to undertake was unlike anything anyone had ever imagined. The mission of the Nighthawk was to journey beyond the boundaries of the solar system, into the unexplored reaches of deep space. Its destination was a galaxy at the very edge of known space, far beyond any human spacecraft had ever traveled. The galaxy, identified only by a distant signal picked up by astronomers, was a mysterious one. No details were known about it. No data had been gathered. It was as if the galaxy had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to find it. The promise of discovery was irresistible, a chance to explore a galaxy no one had ever touched, to see what lay in the vast emptiness beyond. Commander Evelyn Hayes, with her steely resolve and sharp intellect, had led the Nighthawk crew into this mission. But it wasn't just her expertise that made her the perfect leader. It was her ability to inspire the crew to push beyond their limits, to dream of the impossible and turn it into reality. She knew the importance of the mission. This was more than just a journey into space. It was a journey into the future of humanity, a chance to answer some of the most fundamental questions about the universe. As the Nighthawk glided through the void of space, the crew found themselves on the cusp of something truly historic. Each day aboard the Nighthawk brought new discoveries, but the deeper they ventured into the galaxy, the more they began to realize that there were things out there that defied their understanding of space and time. The Nighthawk wasn't just a marvel of technology. It was a fortress in the harsh and unforgiving expanse of space. Its thick hull was designed to withstand the extremes of deep space, and its engines could propel it at speeds unimaginable by earlier standards. But despite its immense strength, the Nighthawk was fragile in ways no one had anticipated. Dr. Samir Patel, the astrophysicist on board, had been working on a theory for years. The idea that there were dark corners of the universe, places where the laws of physics broke down or behaved in ways humanity didn't fully understand. It was a theory that was met with skepticism by many of his peers, but it was one he believed in with all his heart. His research had been dedicated to finding answers to questions that had long puzzled scientists. If there were any place to test his ideas, it would be here in this mysterious galaxy. Patel often spent hours in the ship's observation room, staring at the distant stars through the Nighthawk's advanced telescopic lenses. His mind raced with the possibilities. As the ship traveled farther into the galaxy, strange things began to happen. The stars themselves seemed to behave in odd ways. Some were much brighter than they should have been, while others flickered erratically, as if responding to some unseen force. Patel's curiosity grew with each passing day. Could it be that his theory was right? Was this galaxy a place where the very fabric of space and time was unstable? Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, the Nighthawk's skilled pilot, had been navigating the ship through uncharted territory. The deeper they ventured, the more unpredictable space seemed to become. It was as if the very space they were traveling through was changing, warping in subtle but unsettling ways. The ship's instruments were constantly adjusting, trying to keep up with the shifting environment. Alvarez kept a steady hand on the controls, but even she couldn't ignore the growing tension in the air. Something was not right. The crew had been trained for almost every possible scenario. They had faced storms in the asteroid fields, radiation surges from dying stars, and navigational errors. But what they were about to encounter was beyond their training, beyond anything they had ever prepared for. On the 75th day of the mission, as the Nighthawk crossed into the unknown edges of the galaxy, the crew encountered their first anomaly. It started as a strange distortion, a ripple in the fabric of space itself. At first it was nothing more than a blip on the radar, but then it began to grow. The Nighthawk's instruments went haywire. The ship's external sensors began picking up fluctuations in the surrounding space. It was as if the very universe itself was bending. "Commander," Lieutenant Alvarez called out, her voice tense. "You need to see this." Hayes stepped up to the observation window. A distortion in the stars was visible to the naked eye, a rippling effect in the space around them. It was unlike anything any of them had ever seen before. The stars seemed to warp and twist, their light bending in unnatural ways. It wasn't a simple optical illusion, it was real. Space itself was distorting. "What are we looking at?" asked Dr. Patel, his voice filled with awe and concern. "I don't know," Commander Hayes admitted, "but we're going to find out." The distortion continued to grow, stretching across the galaxy like a massive wound in the fabric of space. The crew was on edge. They were trained to deal with unexpected events, but this was something else entirely. The Nighthawk moved closer to the disturbance, its engines humming with power as the crew prepared to investigate. The sensors went into overdrive, scanning the area for any sign of danger. There was no sign of a physical object or obstacle, no asteroid, no debris. It was as if the space around them was simply warping, but they were moving too fast to turn back now. They had come this far. As the ship approached the anomaly, the distortion became more pronounced. The stars were no longer just warping, they were being pulled toward the center of the disturbance. Light bent in strange arcs, and gravity itself seemed to shift. It was as if they were passing through a gateway into another part of the universe, a place where the rules of space and time no longer applied. "What is this?" Dr. Patel whispered, his face pale. He had seen anomalies in his research, but nothing like this. It felt as though they were entering something alive, something with a purpose, a force that was far beyond human understanding. "This is what we came for," Hayes said quietly, but her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "We've crossed into uncharted space. Whatever this is, we're going to study it." But as the Nighthawk neared the heart of the anomaly, the ship shuddered violently. Systems began to fail. The lights flickered and dimmed. The hum of the engines faltered. A strange, low-frequency noise filled the ship, vibrating through the walls and floors. The crew was jolted in their seats as if they were passing through an invisible barrier, a force pulling them deeper into the disturbance. "Brace yourselves," Commander Hayes shouted, gripping the edge of her console as the ship shook violently. The Nighthawk was no longer gliding smoothly. It was being pulled, dragged toward the center of the anomaly, as if the very fabric of space was trying to consume them. The crew's training kicked in. Alvarez fought to maintain control of the ship's descent, but the distortion was growing stronger with each passing second. "We can't escape it," Lieutenant Alvarez cried, her hands desperately working the controls. The ship was now caught in a gravitational force that had no origin, no explanation. It was as if they had entered a different dimension, a space where physics had no power. In that moment, Commander Hayes understood. They were no longer in the universe they knew. Something far more ancient, far more powerful was at work, and they were about to face it. This part continues to build the suspense and mystery surrounding the Nighthawk's mission, introducing the first major anomaly the crew faces as they venture deeper into the unknown galaxy. The narrative remains cinematic and engaging, with high tension and uncertainty about what the crew will encounter next in the depths of space. There are moments when the universe seems to hold its breath. The chaos, the dissonance, the unexplainable forces at play, everything seems to pause, as if nature itself is watching, waiting for the next move. For the crew of the Nighthawk, that moment arrived after they passed through the eerie distortion and into what appeared to be an unsettling calm. At first, the silence was almost unbearable. After the violence of the anomaly that had nearly torn the ship apart, the sudden stillness felt unnatural. The ship's systems, damaged by the disturbance, were slowly coming back online. The lights flickered to full brightness, the hum of the engines returned, and the low-frequency noise had faded away. But something had changed. The ship was no longer moving with the familiar ease it once had. It seemed trapped in a thick, invisible web, unable to break free. And the crew knew it wasn't just the ship's mechanical systems that had been affected. It was the very space around them. As the Nighthawk drifted, floating in the middle of this strange new region of space, Commander Hayes felt a growing sense of unease. The stars, once vibrant and ever-changing, had become distant, flickering points of light, their usual brilliance dimmed. Even the galaxies, which had once sparkled with promise, now appeared hazy, as if shrouded in a fog that clouded their true nature. The crew sat in silence, each member lost in their own thoughts, but all of them were experiencing the same quiet panic, a fear that grew with the passage of each second. Had they passed through something far worse than they could have ever imagined? Were they now trapped in a place beyond their control? "This doesn't feel right," Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez said, her voice low but filled with anxiety. "We should have been through this by now. We've been drifting for over an hour and nothing's changing." The ship's systems, they're not responding like they should. Commander Hayes stood in front of the control panel, her eyes scanning the readouts as if she could will the ship to behave as it once had. But the numbers were growing more erratic by the second. The instruments were fluctuating wildly, and even the navigational system was giving false readings. The Nighthawk wasn't just lost in space, it was caught in something. "We need to get back on course," Hayes said, but even as she said the words, she knew they were running out of time. Dr. Samir Patel, the ship's astrophysicist, was glued to his monitor, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Commander, there's something else happening. I've been tracking the gravitational anomalies we passed through earlier. There's a fluctuation I've never seen before. It's subtle, but it's there. It's like the fabric of space itself is bending in ways we can't explain." "Bending?" Hayes asked, her voice tight with unease. "Bending how? I don't know, but I've never seen anything like it," Patel replied, shaking his head. "It's not just gravitational, there's something else, something we're missing. Whatever this place is, it's not like anything we've encountered before. The laws of physics are distorted here, and I'm not sure how much longer we can stay in this space." The words echoed in the control room as the team struggled to comprehend what was happening. They had passed through the anomaly, but they had entered something far worse than anyone had anticipated. They were now adrift in a void, suspended between the edges of known space and some other dimension, something so far beyond human understanding that even the brightest minds aboard the Nighthawk struggled to grasp it. Despite the danger, Commander Hayes knew they couldn't sit idle. They had a mission to complete, but it was becoming increasingly clear that they were no longer in control of their fate. Whatever force had caused the anomaly wasn't finished with them yet. They were trapped in something far greater than themselves, something with rules they had no power over. "Lieutenant Alvarez, try to get us back on course. I don't care what it takes," Hayes ordered. "We can't stay here much longer." Alvarez nodded, her hands flying over the controls as she tried to steer the ship. But no matter what she did, the Nighthawk remained stagnant, as if held by an invisible tether, unable to break free. She grit her teeth, her fingers tightening on the controls. There had to be a way out. There had to be some way to reverse course. But every time she tried to input a new direction, the ship's systems fought back. The compass kept spinning wildly, the coordinates refusing to settle. The Nighthawk's navigation system seemed to be caught in a loop, cycling back on itself, repeating the same data over and over. It was as if the ship itself was being trapped in some kind of time loop, caught in a place where the normal flow of space no longer existed. "This is impossible," Alvarez muttered, sweat trickling down her forehead as she continued to fight against the ship's resistance. The silence in the control room was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the engines and the soft beeping of the control panels. Even the crew's breathing seemed to echo in the stillness. Everyone was waiting for something to change, for the ship to break free from the strange hold it was under, but nothing happened. The Nighthawk continued to float, suspended in the void. It was then that the crew realized the terrifying truth. They were not just lost in space, they were being watched. The realization crept over them slowly at first, like a shadow passing over the ship, but as they stared out into the vast emptiness they saw it, the faintest flicker of light in the distance. It was small at first, barely perceptible against the backdrop of the dark sky. But then it grew, gradually becoming larger, more defined. A flash of light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat in the depths of space. "What is that?" Dr. Patel whispered, staring at the growing light. "Is that a ship?" Alvarez squinted at the monitor, trying to make sense of the strange signal. "It's not a ship," she said, her voice trembling. "It's something else, something artificial, but it doesn't match anything in our databases." The light grew brighter, more intense, until it seemed to fill the entire observation window. The crew was frozen, unable to look away. Something was approaching them, something that shouldn't exist in this part of the universe, something that had been waiting for them. Then, without warning, the light exploded in a burst of energy so intense that it nearly threw the crew off their feet. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the entire Nighthawk rattled from the shockwave. The crew scrambled to their stations, trying to regain control, but it was no use. The ship was caught in the blast radius of the energy burst. "What the hell just happened?" Lieutenant Alvarez shouted, her voice filled with panic. The Nighthawk was tossed and turned like a leaf in a storm, its systems failing faster than anyone could comprehend. The light had vanished, but in its wake, ship was left shaken and vulnerable, its systems barely holding on. Commander Hayes gripped the console tightly, her mind racing. The light was a signal, a warning. Something was coming, something that wanted them to stay in place, to not move. The calm they had once hoped for was now a trap. "We need to get out of here," Hayes said, her voice low but resolute. "Now, do whatever it takes to regain control, Lieutenant." Alvarez nodded, fighting to regain control. But the Nighthawk had already fallen into the grip of something far beyond its design, and the crew was about to learn just how little control they had over the forces at play. This section deepens the mystery and introduces new challenges for the crew of the Nighthawk. The calm before the storm gives way to even greater danger as the crew finds themselves trapped, unable to escape the grip of an unknown force. The rising tension and sense of helplessness create a cinematic and suspenseful experience that will keep the audience engaged as the Nighthawk struggled to regain control. Commander Evelyn Hayes stood rigidly at the helm, her mind racing through every possible scenario. The ship's alarms were a constant shriek in her ears, but she barely heard them now. The only thing that mattered was the light they had just witnessed, the intense burst of energy that had shaken the Nighthawk to its core. A signal or something more dangerous, something waiting in the dark. Lieutenant Alvarez, status report. Hayes barked, her voice sharp despite the creeping fear gnawing at her insides. I'm trying, Commander, Alvarez responded, her voice strained as she fought with the controls. But the systems aren't responding the way they should. It's like the ship is stuck. The anomaly we passed through is interfering with everything. Navigation, communications, nothing is functioning normally. Hayes' jaw tightened. They were in a bind. The Nighthawk, designed to withstand the harshest of environments, had never encountered anything like this before. The ship's outer sensors had been disrupted, and even the stellar navigation system was malfunctioning. It felt as though the universe around them had shifted, warping into something they couldn't understand. This isn't just a malfunction, Lieutenant, Hayes murmured, more to herself than to Alvarez. We've entered something else. A zone. Something beyond space itself. Commander, you need to see this, Dr. Samir Patel's voice interrupted the tension. He was standing at his console, scanning data on his screen with growing concern. What is it, Dr. Patel? Hayes asked, walking over to him. Patel turned, his expression pale. The signal, the one we detected earlier, it's not just some random cosmic noise. It's structured like a message. It's coming from somewhere close. Hayes froze. The signal had been faint at first, just a blip on the radar. But now Patel was saying it was not random. It was intentional. Who or what was trying to communicate? Can you pinpoint its source? Hayes asked, trying to mask the urgency in her voice. Patel hesitated, eyes fixed on the flickering screen. It's not easy. The signal it's fragmented, distorted. But Commander, I believe it's coming from inside the anomaly, or possibly from within this very space. It's not external, it's embedded in the fabric around us. Embedded, Hayes repeated, her confusion mounting. Are you saying this signal is part of the very space we're in? That's exactly what I'm saying, Patel replied. It's not a transmission that's passing through space like any radio wave we know. It's something different. It's woven into the structure of this place. It's as if the space itself is trying to tell us something. The implications of his words began to settle in Hayes' chest like a cold weight. She looked at her crew, their faces a mix of disbelief and fear. They had thought they were exploring the boundaries of known space, but what they were discovering now was something else entirely. Something that not only defied all understanding but was actively reaching out to them. How is this possible? Lieutenant Alvarez asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. We've studied the cosmos, traveled to the edges of our solar system, but this is something else. I don't know, Patel admitted, but I think we've stumbled onto something older than anything we can comprehend. Hayes exhaled sharply, the tension in her shoulders stiffening. Can you make contact with the source of the signal? Try to decode it. Patel nodded slowly, eyes narrowing as he worked quickly. I'll try, but the signal is unlike anything I've encountered before. Even with the Nighthawk's computing power, it's going to take some time to even begin to understand it. The room fell into a tense silence as Patel worked, his fingers flying over the control panel, his focus absolute. Outside, the stars hung motionless in the black void of space, distant and indifferent to the crew's struggle. Inside the Nighthawk, the atmosphere had grown heavy, suffocating. Time seemed to stretch and bend in this strange part of the galaxy, and every passing moment felt more like an eternity. Hours passed as Patel worked, his brow beaded with sweat as the crew watched, waiting for answers. The ship continued to drift, held in place by the mysterious forces at work. The calm from earlier seemed like a false tranquility, as if the universe itself was toying with them. There was no sign of any other ships, no detectable life forms in the vicinity. The only thing that remained constant was the signal, a faint, eerie pulse that seemed to grow stronger as they drew closer. Finally, Patel straightened up, eyes wide with realization. Commander, I think I've cracked it. Hayes rushed over, her heart pounding. What is it? What does it say? Patel hesitated for a moment, his face unreadable. Then he turned the screen toward her. The decoded message blinked on the monitor in front of them. We are watching you. You are not alone. Enter the center. The words were simple, direct, but the weight of them hit Hayes like a physical blow. A chill ran down her spine. Enter the center? What center? What were they being asked to do? We're being watched, Lieutenant Alvarez said, her voice strained. Who's out there and why are they contacting us now? We don't know, Patel said, his voice low. But I have a theory. The signal, its source, it's not from another civilization, at least not one like ours. This is a warning, an invitation. They want us to enter the heart of this anomaly. Commander Hayes took a deep breath, her mind racing. She looked around the room at her crew, her team. They were deep in uncharted space, caught in a force that defied everything they knew. The signal had led them here, and now it was demanding they move forward, enter the center. But what did that mean? "This is bigger than we thought," Hayes murmured. "We've crossed into something that isn't just a place, it's alive, and it wants us to enter it." The room grew still again. The weight of their situation was sinking in. The Nighthawk, a ship built for exploration, had become the focus of something greater, something that existed beyond the known universe, beyond human understanding. "Do we have a choice?" Alvarez asked quietly. "Can we turn back?" Hayes looked out the observation window, her eyes narrowing as she considered their options. It was tempting to turn away, to simply abandon the mission, to retreat back into the safety of known space. But they couldn't. The signal had already chosen them. They had come too far, and in a strange way they were bound to continue. "No," Hayes said finally, her voice unwavering. "We have to go forward, whatever this is, whatever it wants from us. It's not something we can ignore. We've come this far, it's time to find out what it all means." Alvarez and Patel exchanged uneasy glances, but both nodded in agreement. There was no turning back now. The unknown had called to them, and they had no choice but to answer. "We enter the center," Hayes said, her voice steady, her eyes resolute. "Prepare for a new phase of the mission. Whatever happens next, we face it together." With a deep breath, she turned to face the helm. The Nighthawk was adrift, suspended in the vastness of space, its path uncertain. But now they had a new purpose, an invitation to enter the heart of the anomaly, to uncover its secrets. And as the crew braced for what lay ahead, one thing was clear. The universe had just become much, much more mysterious than any of them had imagined. This part introduces a new layer of mystery and suspense as the crew decodes the strange signal. They now face a choice, one that could change the course of their mission, and perhaps even humanity's understanding of the universe. The tension builds as they prepare to enter the unknown. Setting the stage for the next chapter in their journey, the Nighthawk had been drifting for what felt like hours. Time in deep space always played tricks on the human mind. Minutes bled into hours, and hours into what seemed like days. The crew sat in an oppressive silence, each member lost in their thoughts as the ship continued its slow, inevitable journey toward the center of the anomaly. The signal had led them here, and now they had no choice but to follow its pull. There was no turning back, no escape. The center awaited them, whatever that meant. As the ship advanced deeper into the heart of the anomaly, the stars outside the observation window began to fade, their light dimming as if being swallowed by an unseen force. The once familiar constellations were now nothing more than faint smudges against the blackness. The universe they had known, everything they had studied and explored, was slipping away, replaced by a vast, empty void. A place where the laws of space seemed irrelevant. Dr. Samir Patel, who had spent most of the journey with his eyes glued to the ship's instruments, was the first to break the silence. "Commander," he said, his voice laced with unease, "the anomaly is intensifying. I've never seen anything like it. It's not just gravitational, it's something else, something alive." Hayes looked up from her own console, her face grim. She had been expecting this. The closer they got to the source of the signal, the more distorted the space around them seemed to become. Time itself felt warped. The crew had all noticed it. Every action, every movement felt like it took longer than it should. The ship's systems had started to behave unpredictably, running checks on things that didn't need checking, displaying errors where there should have been none. There was no question about it now. This was no ordinary space anomaly. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. They were being manipulated by something far beyond their comprehension. "Keep your focus," Hayes ordered, her voice steady despite the growing unease. "We're getting closer. Whatever's out there, we're going to face it. Prepare for anything." Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, the ship's pilot, continued to grip the controls with white-knuckled intensity, her eyes scanning the readouts. "Commander, I'm losing stability in the ship's trajectory. The navigation system is..." She broke off, staring at the screen, her expression turning to one of disbelief. "What the hell is that?" Through the observation window, a growing dark shape was emerging from the abyss of space. It wasn't like any ship, station, or structure the crew had ever seen. It was massive, far larger than the Nighthawk. Its surface appeared to be made of something organic, almost living, with strange, shifting patterns pulsing along its hull. The surface seemed to absorb light, swallowing the stars around it. And yet it exuded a strange, unearthly glow. It was as if the object itself was alive, alive in a way that defied all the crew's understanding of biology, physics, and reality. Alvarez's voice was shaking as she spoke again. This is what the signal was leading us to." Commander Hayes stood at the window, staring at the immense structure. A cold sense of dread settled in her gut. The ship they had encountered was not human-made. It wasn't even made of any material they recognized. This was something else, something ancient, perhaps predating humanity itself, and it was waiting for them. "It's too close," Alvarez muttered, her hands hovering over the controls as the ship's sensors blared a warning. "I can't pull away. We're locked in. It's pulling us in." Patel's voice crackled through the intercom, his tone strained. It's not just pulling us in. It's communicating with us. The signal, it's coming from inside that structure." The realization hit Hayes like a thunderclap. They hadn't just stumbled upon a derelict object in space. They had entered something far more ominous. The anomaly wasn't a natural formation, it was a sentient construct, and it was actively drawing them toward itself. It was a trap. "Brace for impact," Hayes ordered, her voice harsh with the gravity of the situation. She turned to Alvarez. "Get us out of here, do whatever it takes." But Alvarez was already working frantically at the controls, her face a mask of concentration and fear. "I can't, something's locking onto the ship. We're trapped," she screamed. "This thing, it's got a hold of us. The gravity well is too strong. I can't get a proper course correction." The Nighthawk shuddered as a powerful force struck the ship's hull. The entire structure of the vessel groaned under the pressure. The walls rattled. Lights flickered. The alarms wailed. Outside the ship, the massive alien structure loomed larger, its pulsating surface seeming to beckon them. "We can't fight this," Patel muttered, barely audible over the noise. "Whatever this thing is, it's far beyond us." Suddenly, a deep, resonant hum filled the ship, reverberating through the metal. It wasn't a sound produced by any of the Nighthawk systems. It was coming from outside. The noise was rhythmic, almost hypnotic, like a heartbeat pounding through the ship's very core. It was a sound that filled the entire room, sending vibrations through the crew's bodies as if the ship itself was being pulled into this unnatural force. "I'm losing control," Alvarez shouted, her voice strained with panic. "The ship, it's being pulled into it. We're losing all power." Hayes could feel her pulse quickening as she watched helplessly. The Nighthawk was no longer in control. The ship was now at the mercy of this mysterious, monstrous object. And the more they tried to resist, the stronger the force became. Then, without warning, the ship lurched violently as if struck by an invisible force. Crew members were thrown from their seats, their bodies slamming into consoles. The room was thrown into chaos as alarms blared and lights flashed erratically. For a moment, everything went dark. The hum of the alien structure grew louder, resonating deep inside their skulls, making it almost impossible to think. When the lights flickered back on, the crew found themselves no longer in their original position in space. They were inside the structure. The realization hit them with the weight of 100 tons. They had been pulled inside into whatever this object was. The Nighthawk was now trapped within a vast organic cavern, its walls pulsing with the same eerie glow they had seen from the outside. "Get the exterior cameras up now," Hayes barked, moving to the nearest terminal. "We need to know where we are." Patel hurried to his console, fingers trembling as he activated the external cameras. What they saw made their blood run cold. The exterior of the Nighthawk was now surrounded by what appeared to be an endless labyrinthine network of walls that seemed to breathe, exhaling in slow, deliberate pulses. "Where are we?" Alvarez asked, her voice small as if she were speaking in a dream. I don't know," Patel said, his voice filled with disbelief. "But it's like we're inside some sort of living structure. It's not metal, it's not technology. This thing is biological, alive in ways that defy everything we know." The ship's lights flickered again, and for a brief, terrifying moment, the Nighthawk system shut down completely. In that moment, the crew was left in total darkness, suspended inside the alien structure, unable to move or make a sound. A heartbeat-like hum filled the silence, making the air thick with tension. Then slowly, the lights came back on, and they saw something that chilled them to the bone. A figure, no, multiple figures, were moving toward them, emerging from the dark recesses of the structure. Tall, humanoid figures, but not human. Their skin was translucent, their forms shifting and changing, as though they were made of the very substance that surrounded them. They glided through the chamber with eerie grace, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "What are they?" Lieutenant Alvarez whispered, her voice trembling. "We're not alone," Hayes said grimly as the figures drew nearer. "And I think they've been waiting for us." The figures stopped in front of the Nighthawk, their eyes glowing with an intelligence far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. They were not hostile, not yet, but the crew knew deep in their bones that their survival depended on understanding what these beings wanted. And as the figures stretched their long, translucent arms toward the Nighthawk, a deep, reverberating voice echoed in their minds, no words, just a message, a presence that seemed to speak directly to their consciousness. "Welcome, travelers, you are now part of the cycle." This part escalates the tension to a breaking point, introducing the alien figures and the overwhelming sense of power they hold over the Nighthawk. The crew is now in a deadly game, trapped inside the alien structure, and they must learn to understand their captors if they hope to survive. The story keeps building on mystery and suspense, ensuring that the audience is invested in the crew's fate. The figure's voice, "Welcome, travelers, you are now part of the cycle," reverberated in Commander Evelyn Hayes' mind, a strange and unsettling presence that left no room for doubt. It was as if the words themselves had been written into her very consciousness, bypassing the need for any audible speech. Every crew member froze, their hearts pounding, their minds racing to make sense of what they had just encountered. The room seemed to close in on them, the walls of the living structure pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat that felt like the heartbeat of something far more ancient than anything they had ever known. Hayes stood motionless, her thoughts racing. This was it. They had entered something far beyond their understanding. The cycle, what did that mean? Were they being studied, tested, trapped in some kind of interdimensional game? Every possibility raced through her mind, but the answers seemed so far out of reach. The figures, tall, ethereal, and translucent, continued to hover in front of the Nighthawk, their eyes glowing with that strange light. There was no sign of hostility. Yet Hayes could feel the weight of their gaze, their presence pressing in on the crew, demanding something they could not yet comprehend. Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez, her hands shaking at the controls, tried to regain control of the Nighthawk. "Commander, I can't move the ship. The engines are offline. It's like we've been locked in a place. We're stuck." The walls around them seemed to draw closer, the pulse of the structure growing stronger, its hum filling every inch of the ship. It was as if the structure itself had come alive, wrapping its tendrils around the Nighthawk, binding it to the heart of the alien fortress. Dr. Samir Patel stood at the science station, his eyes wide with fear and fascination. These beings, they're not just watching us, they're manipulating the ship. We're not just trapped physically, they've hacked into our systems. I can't even read the signals anymore. It's like the very fabric of our technology is being erased. Hayes clenched her jaw, the cold weight of their situation settling heavily in her chest. "We're not just dealing with an unknown species, Dr. Patel. They control everything around us. They can see every move we make, every thought we think. They must have been watching us for a long time," Patel added, his voice trembling. "How else could they have known we were coming? The signal, it wasn't just a message. It was a trap, a way to draw us in." Commander Hayes turned toward him. "What do you mean? A trap?" Patel glanced back at the strange, shifting beings before them, his expression dark. "The signal wasn't just a distress call or a random transmission. It was a beacon, a way to get us here. We're not the first to answer it. And now that we're inside, we may be part of something far larger than we ever anticipated. This is some kind of experiment, a way to see if we too can survive in this environment. A cycle of exploration, testing, and perhaps destruction." Hayes' mind reeled. The word cycle resonated in her thoughts like a bell tolling, its meaning unfurling slowly. Were they meant to become part of this cycle? What was the point? To study them? To harvest them? Or was there a deeper, darker purpose they had yet to uncover? Suddenly, one of the translucent beings, its body shifting in and out of focus like a mirage, moved forward, raising its long arm toward the Nighthawk. The ship shuddered violently, as if struck by an invisible force. Hayes instinctively stepped back, her hand reaching for the console, but the ship's control systems were still unresponsive. The being's gaze turned toward her, its eyes glowing brighter, and for a moment Hayes felt as though it was peering deep into her very soul, reading every hidden fear, every unspoken thought. Then, without warning, the ship's alarms blared once more, the sound deafening in the otherwise silent control room. The lights flickered, and the temperature in the room dropped sharply, causing the crew to shiver involuntarily. "What's happening now?" Alvarez shouted over the chaos, her voice tinged with panic. "The ship's internal systems are failing," Patel exclaimed, his fingers flying over the console in a futile attempt to regain control. I can't fix this. Whatever they've done, it's beyond anything I've ever seen. We're losing everything." Commander Hayes gritted her teeth. There was no time to waste. If they didn't act fast, they would be at the mercy of whatever the alien beings had planned for them. "Alvarez," she snapped, "get us moving, override the manual controls, do whatever you can." "I can't, Commander," Alvarez shouted back, fear evident in her voice. "The ship's systems have been completely hijacked. It's like they're using us to power their own machines." The walls around them pulsed once more, the strange light growing even more intense. The figures were moving closer, their forms shifting in a fluid, almost organic way. Hayes could see now that their bodies were not merely translucent, they were alive in a way that defied logic. Their skin shimmered with bioluminescence, and the patterns that shifted across them were constantly changing, as if their bodies were in a constant state of metamorphosis. These beings were not just alien, they were something else entirely, something alive on a level that surpassed anything humanity had encountered. Then, as though responding to her thoughts, one of the beings raised a hand, and the ship's systems suddenly flickered back to life. Only it wasn't the Nighthawk's control systems that had been restored, it was the alien technology. The walls around them seemed to hum with power, the structure itself becoming a machine pulsating and alive. "We have to fight back," Patel said, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't let them take over. We need to find a way to disconnect from this structure now." Hayes' heart raced as she weighed their options. They were trapped, surrounded by an advanced, hostile intelligence with no way to break free, yet there was no other choice. She had to protect her crew, she had to protect humanity's future. "Lieutenant," Hayes said, her voice firm, "prepare to eject the main reactor. We may need to force an emergency shutdown to break free. Do it quickly." Alvarez's eyes widened. "But if we eject the reactor, the ship it will die." "We're already dead if we don't," Hayes retorted. "If we don't sever the connection, we'll be nothing more than puppets in their game. Now do it." For a moment, Alvarez hesitated, staring at the control panels in front of her, but the weight of the situation forced her to act. She hit a series of buttons, her fingers moving with desperate precision, and the Nighthawk's internal alarms blared once again, signaling the ejection sequence. Outside the ship, the alien structure seemed to react immediately, its pulses intensifying. The walls vibrated, sending waves of energy through the Nighthawk. It was as if the ship itself had become part of a larger machine, one that wasn't fully under the crew's control. The reactor release sequence was nearly complete when the Nighthawk was rocked by another violent tremor, this one far stronger than any before. The entire ship was thrown to the side, slamming against the structure's organic walls. Lights flickered and every panel in the control room seemed to explode in a cascade of sparks. "Brace for impact," Hayes shouted, but it was too late. The ship lurched again, the structure surrounding them vibrating violently. A sharp, unnatural screech filled the air, an ominous sound that seemed to be coming from the very walls around them. The Nighthawk was no longer a vessel, it was a part of something alive, and the beings were pulling it further into their domain. The lights blinked out for a moment, leaving the crew in complete darkness. Panic spread like wildfire among them. Had they lost, were they now part of the alien cycle to be absorbed into this living machine? Then just as quickly the lights returned. And in the cold, sterile light of the ship's emergency systems, Hayes saw something that made her blood run cold. The figures, the beings were gone, but the ship was no longer alone. Before them, a new presence had appeared. A towering, massive form, dark and formless, a moving shadow of unimaginable size, its outline barely visible but its presence overwhelming. And as it loomed over the Nighthawk, it spoke in a voice deeper than anything the crew had heard before, reverberating not just in their ears but deep in their very souls. "You are now a part of the cycle. You will learn or you will perish." This part continues to escalate the suspense and danger, as the crew is forced to confront not only the mysterious alien beings, but also the growing threat of being trapped inside an unknown and hostile force. The decision to fight back and eject the reactor sets the stage for a desperate struggle for survival. The towering form before them was like nothing any of them had ever seen. Dark and formless, yet somehow alive, it hovered above the Nighthawk, casting a shadow that seemed to devour the very light that surrounded it. The crew could feel its presence, an overwhelming force that pressed down on them, suffocating in its vastness. The voice that had spoken to them earlier reverberated in their minds once again, the words chilling and final. "You are now a part of the cycle. You will learn or you will perish." The weight of those words hung heavily in the air, their implications gnawing at the crew's collective psyche. The Nighthawk was no longer just a ship, it was a vessel of something far larger, far more ancient. It was a part of a cycle, a pattern of unknown design that seemed to stretch across time, space, and perhaps even entire dimensions. The Nighthawk had entered that cycle, and now it was part of a game it couldn't begin to comprehend. Commander Evelyn Hayes stood frozen, her eyes locked on the shadowy figure that loomed above the Nighthawk. Her mind raced, but there was no clear answer. The stakes were higher than ever. The ship was still trapped within the alien structure, completely cut off from the outside world. Every system was either malfunctioning or under the control of whatever intelligence had pulled them in. They were surrounded by an alien force, and the worst part was that they had no idea what the rules of this cycle were. "Commander," Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez's voice broke through the tension, her voice shaking with fear. "We've lost power to everything. The ship, it's gone dark. The core's almost gone critical. We're losing everything." Hayes snapped to attention, her instincts taking over. "How long until we lose full control, Alvarez?" "Minutes," Alvarez replied, her face pale as she worked at the console, but there was no sign of hope. The Nighthawk's systems were deteriorating, and no amount of repair or effort could halt the process. The ship was being taken apart, piece by piece, as if it were being slowly digested by the alien structure that held them. "Patel," Hayes called, turning to the astrophysicist, "anything you can do to stop this, any way to break free?" Patel's fingers danced over his console, but his expression was grim. "The ship's systems are beyond my reach. I can't even track where the energy is coming from. It's like the ship is being absorbed into this structure, this thing. I don't think we can stop it. We need to get out or we'll be taken too." The realization was sinking in. Every single crew member had trained for missions in deep space, for encounters with the unknown, but this, their current predicament, was something no training could have prepared them for. The Nighthawk was no longer a ship. It had become part of something else entirely. The crew had been pulled into a cycle they didn't understand, and now they were at the mercy of beings who could manipulate the very fabric of space around them. "We don't have time," Hayes said firmly, her mind already planning their next move. They had to find a way out. They had to make a decision, even though they had no idea what awaited them on the other side. "Get the escape pods ready, Alvarez. We can't wait any longer." Alvarez's eyes widened with shock. "Commander, are you saying we abandon the ship? If we use the escape pods, we'll be separated. We have no idea where those things will take us." "I don't see another choice," Hayes replied, her voice as calm as she could manage. "We may not survive in here. The Nighthawk is beyond saving. If we stay, we'll become part of this cycle. We need to leave while we still can." Alvarez hesitated, clearly torn. But the ship was falling apart around them, and as much as she wanted to keep fighting, she knew that there was no more fight left in the Nighthawk. The escape pods were their last hope, and even that was a gamble. Understood, Alvarez said, her voice firming with determination. She moved quickly, inputting commands into the ship's backup systems. The escape pods were now their only option. Hayes turned back to Patel. Dr. Patel, do you have any data that might help us? Any knowledge that could guide us in this strange place? Anything at all? Patel looked up, his face pale but filled with determination. There's one thing, he said slowly. The structure, the entity, whatever it is, seems to be made of living matter. We've been assuming it's some kind of alien technology, but if I'm right, it's biological. If it's alive, it may have a consciousness, a mind of its own. So we're dealing with a sentient, organic structure that's trying to absorb us, Hayes muttered, digesting his words. Great, Patel nodded, glancing at the walls that pulsed and shimmered in response to the conversation. It's possible that it's reading our intentions, our fear, our thoughts. If we can find a way to disconnect from it, perhaps communicate in some way, we might be able to regain control. But how? Alvarez asked, her eyes wide with skepticism. We're trapped inside its heart. It's like we've stepped into its very mind. There might be a way, Patel continued, eyes now focused on the holographic map of the structure, but we'll have to interface with it directly through the neural network if it has one. But that means we have to get to the core of the structure. If we don't, well, we won't make it out. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to disconnect. Then it's settled, Hayes said, her voice unwavering. We have to go to the core. We'll try to communicate with it. Alvarez, Patel, help me prep the escape pods, and we'll figure out how to reach the center of this thing. As they moved quickly to prepare for their final desperate push, Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that this was it. This was the end game. There was no way out without facing what lay in the center of this alien structure. The path ahead was unclear, but staying put was not an option. The Nighthawk was crumbling, and the aliens, whatever they were, would not wait forever. The Nighthawk continued to tremble and shake violently as the pulse of the living walls intensified. It was as though the entire structure was alive, reacting to their every move, their every decision. The crew knew that the time to act was now, or they would be consumed by the very thing they had tried to understand. They reached the escape pods, their last lifeline in this alien hell. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, the hum of the living walls becoming deafening. As they climbed into the small, capsule-like pods, Hayes couldn't help but look back at the Nighthawk one last time. Her ship was no more than a tool now, a shell being absorbed by the strange organic force around them. Ready? Hayes asked, turning to her crew. Patel nodded, his face pale but resolute. We'll have to move quickly once we're outside. We may not be safe for long. Alvarez, her expression grim but determined, tapped the button to launch the pod. The engines hummed to life, and with a sudden lurch, the pod shot out from the crumbling hull of the Nighthawk, catapulting them into the unknown. For a moment, everything went dark. The pod's small window offered nothing but blackness, but Hayes knew that they had crossed a line. They were now beyond the Nighthawk, beyond their understanding. The cycle had begun, and no matter what came next, they would face it together. But as they drifted further into the heart of the alien structure, Hayes couldn't shake the nagging feeling that their journey had only just begun. In this part, the Nighthawk's crew is faced with the terrifying realization that they have no other choice but to abandon the ship and escape using the escape pods. The stakes have risen, and the crew must now deal with the unknown, possibly facing something far worse than they ever imagined. The race to the core of the alien structure sets the stage for the next critical chapter in their struggle for survival. The escape pods rocketed away from the Nighthawk, their engines firing with violent intensity, tearing the crew from the chaos of the disintegrating ship. Inside the small, cramped capsules, the crew members were suspended in an eerie silence, the only sound being the low hum of the pod's emergency systems. The world outside the pod was a void, a pitch-black space that seemed to stretch into infinity, without any stars or distant galaxies to offer a sense of perspective. The vastness of the unknown closed in on them like a suffocating fog. Commander Evelyn Hayes sat rigid in her seat, her mind still reeling from the chaos they had just escaped. Her eyes flicked to the small viewport where the Nighthawk had once been. Now, all that remained was the organic, living structure that had taken them into its grasp. The pulsing, dark shape that had once loomed above them now seemed to stretch into the abyss, an immense, inescapable prison. Her hands were still clenched on the control panel, fingers sore from gripping the smooth, metallic surface. She wasn't sure if it was from the physical strain of the escape or the sheer mental fatigue of what they had just survived. Their ship was gone, its systems hacked and overwhelmed by a force beyond their understanding. And yet, even now, it felt as though the structure still watched them, its presence hanging over their minds like an unshakable specter. The escape pods were designed to be simple, a last resort escape from danger, but this was no ordinary emergency. The structure that had ensnared them was alive, it had spoken to them, and its motives were far from clear. What had it wanted? Why had it chosen them? And where were they now? The pod's controls flickered to life as the navigation systems rebooted. The deep silence of space felt suffocating in the small cabin. Lieutenant Sofia Alvarez sat beside Hayes, her eyes wide and alert, her face pale but determined. "We're out," Alvarez muttered, breaking the silence. "But where are we?" "The pod's navigation system says we're still inside the structure, but I don't know where exactly we are." Hayes nodded, her thoughts racing. She could feel the weight of Alvarez's words. The structure was still controlling their path. No matter how far they'd come, they were still at its mercy. The pod's trajectory was pulling them deeper into the unknown. "We need answers," Hayes said, her voice low. "We can't just drift aimlessly. We need to find a way to communicate with it, figure out what it wants with us." "We've tried that before," Alvarez said, her voice tinged with frustration. "Every time we try to understand it, it feels like we're being pulled farther into its grip. Maybe the answer isn't talking to it. Maybe the answer is escaping it." "That's what I'm worried about," Hayes replied, her eyes darkening with the weight of their situation. "If we don't understand what's happening here, we might never escape. We need to keep our minds sharp. We need to get to the heart of this place. Only then will we know what it wants." Dr. Samir Patel, sitting in the back of the pod, turned toward them. He had been silent since the escape, absorbed in the analysis of his own equipment. But now he spoke, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "We've never seen anything like this before," Patel said. "I keep running simulations, but nothing makes sense. The structure, it's not just alive, it's something older than we can comprehend. It's beyond biology, beyond physics as we know it. It has a consciousness, a mind, if you will, that operates on a different level, and we're part of its cycle now." Hayes let the words settle for a moment, the implications sinking in. "A cycle," she repeated softly. "What kind of cycle? Why are we part of it?" Patel stared out the small viewport, watching as the dark shape of the living structure drifted farther into the distance, barely visible against the endless expanse of black. "I can only speculate, but my theory is this. The structure is part of a living, interdimensional ecosystem. It moves through different planes of existence, harvesting knowledge and life from civilizations it encounters. It doesn't destroy, it absorbs. It consumes and learns, adapting itself to the characteristics of whatever it absorbs." "Consumes and learns," Alvarez echoed. "That's terrifying. Are you saying that we are part of its experiment?" "That's what I think," Patel answered quietly. "It doesn't just take physical matter, it learns from it. It adapts to the knowledge of the beings it absorbs. And now, we're part of that process." A chill ran down Hayes' spine. The idea that they weren't just trapped in this structure, but used by it in a way they couldn't understand was more terrifying than anything they had faced before. They had entered the heart of a living system, a mind that had evolved far beyond their understanding, and now they were being examined, catalogued, absorbed. "I don't know how much longer we can survive inside this place," Patel continued. "But I know one thing, it's not just the ship that's at risk, it's us. If we don't figure out a way to communicate with it, if we don't understand what it's doing to us, we could become part of its structure, forever." Commander Hayes felt the gravity of his words. The crew was still alive for now, but their survival depended on understanding what lay ahead. They couldn't stay in the escape pods forever. The strange, living structure that surrounded them was still a mystery, and its intentions were far from clear. "We need to get to the heart of the structure," Hayes said, her voice resolute. "We need to find a way to communicate with it, find out why it's doing this and what it really wants." The pod's navigation system suddenly buzzed to life, its warning lights flashing. A new set of coordinates appeared on the screen, coordinates that led deeper into the alien structure, toward a section that had been marked as a potential interface. The words were cryptic, but they seemed to imply that this was the part of the structure where communication with its consciousness might be possible. "This is it," Patel said, pointing at the screen. "If we can reach this interface, maybe we can communicate with it. Maybe we can finally understand what it wants." Hayes looked at the screen, her expression determined. "Then let's go. Prepare for landing, Alvarez, we're going in." The pod's engines roared as it changed course, propelling them toward the heart of the alien structure. For a moment, the ship seemed to be moving on its own, the gravitational pull from the living walls guiding them in. As they neared the interface, the walls of the structure pulsed faster, the eerie glow intensifying until the entire pod seemed to be bathed in its light. The space outside the pod was shifting, rippling and distorting, as if they were passing through a different plane of existence. It was a visual experience unlike anything Hayes had ever encountered, a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes that seemed to warp and change before their eyes. The very nature of reality felt tenuous, as if the rules of physics and time no longer applied. As the pod descended into the interface, a strange sensation washed over the crew. The air inside the pod seemed to thicken, like a weight pressing down on them from all sides. It was as if the structure was enveloping them, drawing them in deeper. "Stay sharp," Hayes muttered under her breath, gripping the controls. "We don't know what's waiting for us." The pod touched down with a soft thud, its engines powering down as the crew looked out through the viewport. What lay ahead was a vast, cavernous space, a vast hall the size of a city, with walls that shimmered and undulated like living flesh. The air was thick with a strange energy, and the floor beneath them pulsed with the same rhythmic beat they had felt before. It was a place of life, but not life as they knew it. Everything here seemed to breathe, to live in a way that transcended biology. "We're inside the core," Alvarez whispered, eyes wide with awe and terror. This is where it all happens." Hayes took a deep breath. They had reached the heart of the structure, but they still didn't know what awaited them. Would they find answers, or would they become part of the cycle, absorbed into the very structure they had sought to understand? The future was uncertain, but they were here now, and there was no turning back. As the crew disembarked from the pod and stepped onto the pulsating floor of the alien core, Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the precipice of something far greater than themselves. They had crossed into a new reality, and now they would face the consequences of their actions, whatever those might be. In this part, the crew confronts the terrifying reality of being part of an ancient, interdimensional cycle. As they journey deeper into the heart of the alien structure, they are faced with the truth that they are at the mercy of an intelligence beyond their understanding. The story builds to a critical moment where they must navigate this unknown environment and find a way to communicate with the alien consciousness, setting the stage for a dramatic showdown with their fate.